Hi, I'm Maura. I called my in-laws, begging them to help save my 12-year-old son's life. His heart surgery couldn't wait. They told me it was too risky. Then they packed their designer luggage and flew off on a $76,000 vacation, posting, "Family is everything," while I sat alone by my boy's hospital bed, praying he'd make it through the night. But 2 weeks later, their perfect world started to crumble. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. The plastic chair dug into my back, and my fingers ached from twisting the small silver bracelet on my wrist. I'd been doing that for hours, like it could somehow hold me together. The beeping of Elias's monitor in the next room was steady, but each sound reminded me of the reality I couldn't escape. My 12-year-old son was waiting for a heart surgery that couldn't wait. My coffee had gone cold on the side table hours ago, but I couldn't bring myself to drink it. My body was here in this fluorescent-lit hallway, but my mind kept circling around the same question. How much longer could I keep holding on before something gave out? I stared out the narrow window at the snow-covered parking lot, the gray sky pressing down like a weight. I didn't want to make this call. I hated the idea of asking for help, especially from them. But when it came to Elias, my pride didn't matter. I picked up my phone, scrolled to Claudine's number, and pressed call. "Maura?" Her voice was sharp, polished, like she was already bracing for me to ask for something. "Claudine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's Elias. He needs an emergency surgery. The doctors say there's a procedure with a much higher success rate, but insurance won't cover all of it. I need help with the difference." There was a pause. I could picture her pursing her lips, the way she always did when she was weighing how to say no without sounding cruel. "Oh, Maura," she said finally. "That sounds serious. But are you sure? Sometimes these hospitals push expensive procedures on desperate parents. Maybe you should slow down and think this through." I gripped the bracelet tighter. "I've thought it through. This isn't about overreacting. It's about giving my son the best chance to live. Please, I'll pay you back every cent. I just need you to co-sign the loan so I can get this done." There was another silence, and then Warren's voice came through, low and distant, like he wasn't even holding the phone himself. "Insurance covers the basic surgery, doesn't it? Maybe that's good enough. These extras, sometimes they don't change much." Good enough? My son's life wasn't some bargain option they could compromise on. I could feel my chest tightening. "Please," I whispered. "He's 12. He deserves more than good enough. I'm begging you." Claudine's tone hardened. "Maura, it's just too risky. Financially, this isn't the right time for us to take on that kind of liability. You understand?" No. I didn't understand. My son was lying in a hospital bed with his whole future hanging by a thread, and they were worried about their financial comfort. I tried to say something, anything, but my voice cracked, and all I managed was, "He's your grandson." They didn't answer. Claudine mumbled something about praying for us, and then the line went dead. I sat there, staring at the screen, my hands shaking. My mouth tasted like metal. I felt like I'd been reduced to nothing more than a beggar at their feet, humiliated for even asking. An hour later, as I sat numbly scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the raw ache in my chest, I saw it. Claudine's newest post. "Family is everything," the caption read. Underneath was a photo of her and Warren at the airport, grinning beside a mountain of designer luggage. Dubai, tagged in big, bold letters. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't that they couldn't help. It was that they didn't want to. They chose a $76,000 vacation over their grandson's life, and they had the audacity to call that family. My hand clenched around the bracelet so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. I just whispered to myself, "Never again." That was yesterday. Now the hospital room was wrapped in quiet darkness, broken only by the faint glow from the monitors and the rhythmic blip of Elias's heart. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, cold and sharp. I sat slouched in the chair by his bed, my arms folded tightly across my chest, my fingers tracing the grooves of that silver bracelet again. He lay so still, his face pale against the white sheets, the sedatives keeping him tucked away from the pain of waiting. The hum of machines should have been comforting, proof he was still here. But it wasn't. It was a reminder, every sound telling me how fragile everything was. "Maura?" Nurse Karen peeked her head in, her voice soft but steady. "Can I get you anything? Tea? A blanket?" I shook my head, managing a polite smile. "No, thank you. I'm fine." She lingered for a moment, like she wanted to say more, then quietly closed the door. "Fine." That word felt ridiculous in my mouth. I was anything but fine. But how could I explain that what I needed wasn't tea or a blanket? What I needed was for my in-laws to care enough about their grandson to help save his life. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and let the memory of that phone call replay in my head. Too risky. Slow down. Maybe that's good enough. Their voices stuck like splinters under my skin. They weren't just words, they were judgments, verdicts about me. They thought I was panicking, overreacting, incapable of making rational choices. Claudine's tone was the worst part. Calm, patronizing, like she was humoring me, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. And Warren, distant, detached, as if saying, maybe that's good enough. About a life-saving surgery wasn't a dagger through my heart. They think I can be handled. They think if they speak softly enough, I'll just nod and back down. But I've been down this road with them before. My mind wandered back to my first Christmas with Claudine and Warren, years ago. Their house smelled like pine and money, every corner perfectly decorated, a magazine spread come to life. I remembered Claudine standing over me at the dinner table, gently correcting the way I placed the forks, all with that tight-lipped smile. "In this family, presentation matters," she'd said, like I should be grateful for the lesson. Later, she lavished compliments on my sister-in-law. Such grace, such elegance. And when she turned to me, it was only to point out my hair looked a bit casual for such a special evening. That night, I learned what it meant to be in their world. I wasn't family. I was an accessory, a guest in their house. The years didn't change that. Even now, with Elias fighting for his life, they still saw me as the outsider, the woman their son had married, but never one of them. My phone buzzed on the side table, jerking me back into the present. A voicemail from Warren. I pressed play. "Maura," his voice droned, professional and cold, like he was dictating a memo. "This isn't personal. We can't be responsible for your decisions. Please don't involve us any further." I played it again, and again, until I could recite every word. Not personal. What could be more personal than a boy's life? Than my son's life? I stared at the ceiling until my eyes stung. I wanted to scream, but the weight of my own exhaustion held me still. If they wouldn't help, then I had to find another way. I pulled my laptop onto my knees and opened a blank document. A list. Names of anyone I could call. Friends, co-workers, neighbors, anyone who might give me a chance to get this money. If family wasn't coming, I'd build my own army. I thought of Claudine and Warren on their first-class flight, glasses of champagne in their hands, and felt something inside me harden. I typed the first name and exhaled. It's time I stop waiting to be saved. And the first call I made wasn't to who you'd expect. It was Dana. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Not since I left the law firm where we'd both worked late nights and traded stories over cheap takeout in the break room. Her number was still saved in my phone, though I hesitated before pressing it. My thumb hovered over the call button. How do you reach out to someone you barely know anymore and ask them for help with something like this? The cafeteria around me was quiet, just the hum of the vending machines and the occasional clatter of a coffee pot behind the counter. I needed to be anywhere but that room upstairs, staring at my son's sleeping face while machines kept time with his fragile heart. I pressed call. Maura? Her voice was warm but surprised. Wow, it's been, 5 years? Yeah, I said, forcing a laugh. Feels like a lifetime. After a few awkward pleasantries, I blurted it out. Dana, I wouldn't be calling if I wasn't desperate. My son needs emergency heart surgery. Insurance isn't covering the full cost. I've tried everything. I'm out of options. There was a pause. I expected polite discomfort, maybe an apology, maybe even a quick excuse to hang up. But instead, she said, "Send me the details. I'll see what I can do." Just like that. No hesitation. I almost dropped the phone. Dana, I don't even know what to say. Say yes, she replied simply. Send me the information. When the call ended, I just sat there staring at my phone. Relief mixed with humiliation, like oil and water. I had to beg someone I hadn't spoken to in years for help, while my in-laws, people who plastered "family is everything" all over their social media, sipped champagne on the other side of the world. As if summoned by that thought, my phone buzzed. A text from Claudine. Hope Elias is feeling better. We'll call when we get back. Stay strong. Attached was a photo. Her and Warren, dressed in designer resort wear, smiling under a palm tree. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. It wasn't just that they were on vacation, it was the audacity, the gall to pretend they cared, to pretend they were the kind of grandparents who'd do anything for their grandson while leaving me here to fight for his life alone. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I whispered to myself, "They want me quiet. They want me small. I won't be." I needed answers. I needed to understand why they could be so cold. So I called Valerie, Claudine's daughter, my sister-in-law. She picked up on the second ring. Maura, is everything okay? No, I said bluntly. Elias isn't okay. And your parents? I swallowed hard. They refuse to help. Valerie, I don't get it. I need to know why. She sighed, and for a moment, I thought she'd defend them. But then she said, Mom told me you're overreacting. She thinks you're just using guilt to get money. My jaw tightened. Overreacting? My child might die and that's an overreaction? She said you have a tendency to dramatize things, Valerie continued, her voice careful, like she was quoting someone she didn't fully agree with. They think you'll figure it out without their involvement. They don't want to be responsible if things go wrong. I laughed, but it came out broken. So now I'm not just a burden. I'm a manipulator. I'm sorry, Maura, she whispered. I don't agree with them. I just thought you should know. Thanks for the honesty, I said, even though the words felt like ash in my mouth. When the call ended, I just sat there, phone in my lap, staring out at the snow-covered parking lot. My heart ached, but there was also a sharpness there now, something hard and unyielding. I opened my laptop again. My first list, the one of people to call for help, wasn't enough anymore. I needed a new one. This list wasn't for asking, it was for exposing neighbors, old friends, people in Claudine and Warren's pristine social circle who thought they were saints. People who needed to know the truth. If they wanted to protect their image, maybe it was time that image cracked. At the top of the page, I wrote their names in big, bold letters, Claudine and Warren, and underlined them. You taught me pride, I whispered. Now watch me strip yours. But first, I needed to know exactly what they'd taken from us. 3 days later, I was sitting in the hospital lobby, my laptop balanced on my knees, when my phone rang. The number was familiar, though it took me a moment to place it. Maura? The voice on the other end was gentle, professional. It's Greg Turner. I handled your husband's estate a few years back. I straightened in my chair. Greg, hi. It's been a while. I heard about Elias, he said softly. I'm so sorry. How is he? Sedated, I replied. We're waiting on the final prep for his surgery. I wasn't sure why he was calling, but any kind voice felt like a lifeline. There was a pause, and then his next words caught me off guard. Maura, has Elias received his inheritance yet? My stomach dropped. His what? His inheritance, Greg repeated. From his grandfather's trust. It was set to become partially accessible when he turned 12. I froze. I could hear the buzz of the lobby vending machine, the muffled chatter from the front desk, but all of it felt far away. Greg, I don't know what you're talking about. He sounded surprised. You didn't know? No, I said, my voice sharp now. No one told me anything about a trust. What exactly are you talking about? Your father-in-law was the trustee, Greg explained carefully. After your husband passed, Claudine and Warren were listed as co-trustees. The trust was meant for Elias, for medical expenses, education, emergencies, especially emergencies. My fingers gripped the armrest so tightly I thought I might rip the fabric. And you're telling me they knew about this? That money was there, for Elias, and they let me beg them for help? Greg hesitated, like he was trying to cushion the blow. Maura, I've seen recent withdrawals, large ones, not for medical expenses. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. How large? Dozens of transactions. Thousands each time, labeled as family expenses. Family. That word burned. They had taken what belonged to Elias, money his grandfather intended to protect his future, and used it for themselves, for their vacations, for their new cars, for Valerie's kids' lavish gifts. I whispered, more to myself than to Greg. They let me humiliate myself. They let me crawl to them, knowing all along they were sitting on his money. Greg cleared his throat. Maura, I can send you every statement, every record. You'll need them if you decide to take action. Send them, I said, without hesitation. Every last one. That evening, after returning to my apartment, I sat on the worn couch surrounded by Elias's baby photos, the laughter of his toddler years frozen in frames. The air smelled faintly of his old crayons and the chamomile tea I hadn't touched. I replayed Claudine's words in my head. It's too risky. Maybe the basic surgery is good enough. I heard Warren's voicemail, cold and dismissive. We can't be responsible for your decisions. They weren't protecting themselves from my so-called bad decisions. They were protecting stolen money. Every scene from the past year replayed itself with painful clarity. Their gifts to Valerie's family, their sudden talk of international trips, the designer luggage in their vacation photo. It all made sense now. They hadn't just abandoned me. They'd robbed my son and flaunted it in my face. I opened my laptop and stared at my growing list. This wasn't just a list of people who could help. This was a list of witnesses, people who would need to hear the truth about Claudine and Warren. I typed a message to Greg. I want everything, every statement, every detail. Please. Then I added new names to the list. Their friends, their business contacts, the people who adored their perfect image. This time, I wasn't just asking for help. I was preparing to break the facade they'd built. When I shut my laptop, the sound echoed through the quiet room. If they wanted war, I said softly, they'd get it. But first, I needed to see them. Face to face. 4 days later, I was in the hospital's family meeting room, staring at a paper cup of cold coffee I hadn't touched. Elias was still sedated, his monitors chirping steadily upstairs. But my mind wasn't in that building anymore. It was already at their house. "They're back in town," Greg told me earlier that morning, his voice steady but clipped. "If you're ready, we can pay them a visit. Together. Keep things civil." Civil. I rolled the word around in my head like a foreign language. I wasn't sure I remembered what that felt like anymore. By mid-morning, I was in his car, watching familiar neighborhoods blur past. The houses grew larger the closer we got, until finally, we pulled into their driveway, the one with the fresh brickwork and the manicured hedges that screamed, "We're doing better than you." Greg gave me a quick look before we got out. "Remember, you're in control. Let them do the talking first." I nodded, even though my heart was pounding so hard I felt it in my teeth. Claudine opened the door. Still in her vacation clothes, a loose, expensive-looking wrap, gold bangles stacked on her wrists. She blinked as if genuinely surprised. "Maura? Oh dear, you should have called." The fake sweetness nearly made me laugh. Behind her, the hallway was cluttered with designer luggage, tags from Dubai still dangling from the handles. I thought of the hospital cafeteria dinners, the smell of antiseptic, Elias's hand limp in mine. And now this. "I didn't want to interrupt your rest," I said flatly. Her smile tightened. "You're here with—" She glanced at Greg, who introduced himself with a polite nod. Warren appeared in the background, wearing a crisp polo shirt like he hadn't just flown across the world. "Maura," he said warmly, as if he were greeting an old friend. "We've been meaning to talk." Greg gestured subtly toward the living room, and they led us inside. I didn't sit. Warren folded his hands and leaned back in his chair. "You must understand, managing that trust takes careful planning. You wouldn't want to make a hasty mistake." Trust. The word sounded poisonous now. Claudine perched on the arm of a chair, tilting her head like a teacher scolding a child. "We thought it best not to burden you while you're so emotional." My voice shook, but I kept it low. "You didn't want to burden me? By telling me you spent my son's money?" Her face hardened. "We didn't spend his money. We allocated it for family needs." "Family," I repeated. "While I sat in the ICU, begging you for help, you were buying tickets for a vacation that cost more than the surgery Elias needs." "Lower your tone," Claudine hissed. Greg cleared his throat, but I didn't let him step in. I wasn't here to be rescued. "I've seen the statements," I said, my voice steadier now. "Do you want me to list every charge? Or should we just start with the vacations?" Her smile dropped entirely. Warren shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "You're making a scene," Claudine said coldly. I stepped closer, sliding a folder from my bag onto their marble counter. "No. I'm making history. This ends today." Greg's hand brushed mine as I stepped back, his way of reminding me I wasn't alone. "You said family is everything," I continued. "Prove it. Full accounting, full repayment, and I want control of Elias's trust. Effective immediately." Claudine reached for the folder, but didn't open it. Her hands trembled just slightly before she pushed it back toward me. "You'll regret this, Maura." I met her eyes, unblinking. "No," I said quietly. "You will," but by then, regret was no longer part of my vocabulary. 2 mornings later, my phone lit up before the sun had fully crept through the blinds. At first, I thought it was the hospital calling. Instead, it was a flood of messages. Valerie, a few distant cousins of Warren's, even a neighbor of theirs I barely knew. "Maura, what are you doing to this family?" Valerie's text read. Another one, from a number I didn't save. "You're dragging their name through the mud. Have you no shame?" I scrolled, my chest tightening. Then I saw it. Claudine's new post, a photo of her pristine living room with some quote superimposed on it. Some people will do anything for money. Family is about trust, not greed. Comments underneath were filled with sympathy. Stay strong, Claudine. Don't let toxic people ruin your peace. It wasn't subtle. It was meant for me. I threw the phone onto the couch and stared at the ceiling. They were trying to paint me as the problem. Me. The one sleeping in a hospital chair, holding my son's hand while they sipped lattes in a marble kitchen. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail from Warren. I hesitated, then hit play. Maura. His voice was syrupy, like he was doing me a favor just by calling. We'd like to resolve this quietly. There's an offer coming your way. I hope you'll think about it seriously. An hour later, Greg emailed me the offer. A fraction of the trust, a sum so low it barely covered Elias's current surgery, with one condition. I'd sign a non-disclosure agreement. Silence, in exchange for scraps of my son's future. I closed the laptop and sat in Elias's room, my elbows resting on my knees, staring at his pale, sleeping face. Machines beeped steadily around us. They think they can erase me, I whispered. They think I'm too tired to fight. For a moment, a dangerous, fleeting moment, I considered it. Signing. Walking away. Just so this weight on my chest would lift, just so I could breathe again. Then I noticed the little toy bracelet on his nightstand, the one Claudine gave him years ago, engraved with his initials. I remembered twisting its twin, the silver one, on my own wrist when I begged her for help. That bracelet had once felt like a symbol of connection. Now it burned like a reminder of my failure to protect him. I reached for my phone and called Greg. They want a war, he said when I told him. Then let's give them one, but on our terms. Something in his voice steadied me. That night I spread everything out on my kitchen table, printed photos of their vacation, the matching luggage, the champagne toasts, bank statements Greg had pulled for me, each one a testament to their theft, the NDA. I organized it all chronologically, my pen scribbling notes in the margins, dates, amounts, receipts. They wanted to play dirty. Fine. But I wasn't the same woman who begged on the phone 2 weeks ago. 2 days later, I texted Claudine. Let's meet for coffee. Just us. She replied within an hour. Of course, dear. Tomorrow morning works. What she didn't know, what I didn't bother telling her, was that Greg would be there too, and 2 other witnesses sat quietly nearby, ready to document everything. This wasn't a conversation anymore. This was an opening move. At the cafe, Claudine arrived in an immaculate white coat, her hair perfectly styled, like she was stepping out of a magazine. She ordered a latte with oat milk, stirred it leisurely, then looked at me over the rim of her cup. You don't know who you're dealing with, she said, her lips curling into a smirk. But by then, I finally did, and I was ready to end it. I arrived at the cafe 30 minutes early. Greg was already there, laptop open, tapping notes like it was just another day at work. Remember, he said, glancing up at me. You're in control. They'll try to rattle you. Don't give them the satisfaction. I nodded, clutching the folder in my lap. Inside were weeks of sleepless nights, turned into neatly organized ammunition. Bank records, screenshots, and vacation photos. My fingers traced the edge of the cover as I replayed everything they'd done. Every condescending remark, every cold refusal, every lie. When Claudine and Warren finally walked in, they didn't look like people who had anything to lose. Claudine wore a tailored coat with gold buttons and a silk scarf knotted just so. Warren in a crisp navy blazer, posture perfect. They exuded the kind of confidence that comes from a lifetime of never being told no. Maura, Claudine cooed, leaning in to kiss the air near my cheek as though we were meeting for brunch. You should have told us you'd bring Greg. This could have been just family. I ignored the jab and gestured to the seats across from me. Let's get to it. Claudine's smile lingered, but her eyes sharpened. She sat, folding her hands over her designer bag like a queen settling into her throne. Warren remained standing for a moment, surveying the scene, before taking his seat. I'll start, Claudine said, leaning in. Maura, if you push this any further, you'll lose more than just this case. Do you really want Elias to grow up knowing his mother ruined his family's name? Is that the legacy you want for him? My jaw tightened, but I said nothing. Let her think I was intimidated. Let her keep talking. You've always been emotional, she continued. This isn't about greed, dear. It's about protecting what's left of this family. Greg gave me a subtle nod. Time. I opened the folder, sliding it across the table toward them. If you're so concerned about family, you might want to look at these. Claudine didn't reach for it, so I pulled out a photo and placed it on top. Them in a luxury suite, champagne in hand, the date printed neatly at the bottom. This was taken 3 days after I begged you to help fund Elias's surgery. Her smile faltered for the first time. Warren shifted in his seat. Where did you get this? He asked. His voice clipped. Public social media, I replied smoothly. You should be more careful about what you post when you're trustees of a child's fund. Speaking of which, I tapped the bank statements. These withdrawals aren't for Elias. They're for vacations, cars, and gifts. You let me beg while you drained his trust. Claudine's voice turned icy. You're making a scene. No, I said evenly. I'm making history. This ends today. Greg spoke up then, his tone calm but firm. We've already filed for an injunction to freeze your accounts. The court will review everything, but we thought it fair to give you an opportunity to settle this quietly. Claudine's eyes widened briefly before she masked it with a scoff. Warren's composure cracked. A vein in his temple pulsed as he leaned forward. You wouldn't dare drag this family through the mud. Do you know what that would do to you? I met his glare without flinching. Try me. The silence that followed was deafening. For once, they didn't have a clever retort or patronizing quip. I stood, sliding my chair back slowly. You said family is everything. Prove it, or I'll make sure everyone knows what those words mean to you. Claudine's hand trembled as she pushed the folder back toward me. You'll regret this, Maura. I smiled. Not the desperate begging kind they were used to, but one that said I'd finally learned how to fight on their level. Greg leaned in as we walked toward the door, his voice low. You just flipped the script. But I knew they wouldn't go down quietly, and I was ready for their last, desperate strike. 3 days later, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was another update from the hospital, but when I unlocked it, my heart sank. Dozens of messages, from neighbors, relatives, even old church friends. Some were blunt, is this true? Others were thinly veiled, praying for your mental health, Maura. Then I saw it. An email forwarded to me by a friend, originally sent by Claudine. She'd BCC'd half the community. We are heartbroken to share that Maura has been struggling mentally and is making rash financial decisions regarding Elias's care. Please pray for our family as we navigate this difficult time. My hands trembled as I scrolled. She'd attached a photo of Elias in his hospital bed. My photo, with a caption implying I was using his condition for financial gain. They weren't just trying to silence me, I whispered to myself. They were trying to destroy me. By mid-morning, my apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in with each notification ping. I needed to do something, but before I could think, Greg called. They've filed an emergency motion, he said. What? To have Claudine reinstated as the sole trustee. They want to freeze you out completely. I barely had time to process it before we were in court the next day. Claudine, dressed in somber gray, sat beside Warren, hands folded like a grieving matriarch. Her voice trembled as she addressed the judge. "We've always acted in Elias's best interest. Unfortunately, Maura's emotions have clouded her judgment. We simply want stability for our grandson." It was masterful. Every word chosen to paint me as unhinged. I wanted to scream, to stand up and shout the truth, but Greg's hand on my arm anchored me. By the time we left the courthouse, the motion hadn't been decided, but I felt the sting of defeat settling in. For a moment, I almost believed they'd win. That evening, I went straight to the hospital. Elias was asleep, his small chest rising and falling in rhythm with the soft beep of the monitor. My eyes fell on the plastic bracelet sitting on his nightstand, the same one from weeks ago. I picked it up and turned it in my fingers, letting the familiar texture ground me. "This isn't about me," I murmured, tears stinging my eyes. "It's about keeping my promise to you." A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. Valerie slipped in, glancing around nervously before shutting it behind her. "You didn't get this from me," she said, placing a small USB drive in my palm. I blinked. "What is it?" "Everything you need." I didn't ask how she got it. Maybe guilt had finally chipped away at her loyalty to Claudine, or maybe she just didn't want to go down with them. Either way, I didn't care. Back at my apartment, Greg and I plugged it into his laptop. The files were explosive. Recorded conversations between Claudine and Warren, laughing about keeping Maura in her place. Receipts for extravagant purchases from Elias's trust, everything from luxury hotel suites to custom jewelry. And emails, so many emails, openly discussing how to manage me, as though I were just another problem to budget for. Greg leaned back in his chair, whistling low. "Maura, this isn't just civil anymore. This is criminal." The humiliation I'd felt in that courtroom twisted into something hotter, sharper, righteous anger. "They wanted a war," I said, my voice steady. "Fine, but we're ending it on my terms." We spent hours preparing, cataloging evidence, drafting statements. Greg reached out to the DA's office, while I contacted a journalist Claudine had always feared, the kind who turned whispers into headlines. By midnight, everything was in motion. Greg closed his laptop and looked at me seriously. "Once we do this, there's no going back." I didn't hesitate. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. 2 weeks later, I woke up to the kind of quiet that doesn't last long. My phone was already vibrating against the nightstand, buzzing with notifications. I rubbed my eyes and unlocked it, and there it was, the article. A bold headline splashed across my screen. "Local philanthropists accused of embezzling grandson's trust fund." The journalist hadn't held back. Every receipt, every email, every smug comment Claudine and Warren had made about managing me, it was all there in black and white. They'd been exposed for exactly who they were, liars who had stolen from their own grandson. By noon, my phone was ringing non-stop. But this time it wasn't pitying church friends or Claudine's allies. It was reporters, community members, people who had once sung her praises now publicly shaming her. On social media, the same people who once commented, "What a beautiful family," under her vacation selfies were now saying, "Disgusting. Family is everything? Really?" Greg called me that afternoon. "They've been subpoenaed," he said flatly. "Fraud, mismanagement. The DA's building a criminal case. Their accounts are frozen." I sat there in silence, letting the words sink in. They were finally being held accountable. For once, they weren't the ones writing the narrative. The courthouse smelled of old wood and stale coffee, and yet, walking in that day felt like stepping into a new world. Claudine and Warren sat at the defense table, their posture still arrogant, though the lines around Claudine's mouth seemed deeper. She didn't glance at me, and I didn't need her to. The judge's words were steady and sharp. This court finds Maura to be reinstated as the rightful trustee of Elias's trust. Additionally, the defendants are ordered to pay damages for their deliberate mismanagement of funds. Claudine's lawyer tried to plead for leniency, painting them as misguided but well-intentioned grandparents. The judge wasn't having it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate, and it will not be excused. When Claudine finally turned her head to glare at me, I didn't look away. For years, she'd thrived on my discomfort, my need to keep the peace. But now I wasn't hers to intimidate. After court, I drove straight to the hospital. Elias was propped up in bed, color returning to his cheeks, cartoons playing softly on the TV. He noticed my red eyes before I could hide them. "You kept your promise, didn't you?" he said quietly. I swallowed the lump in my throat and smiled. I did. I picked up his little toy bracelet from the table, the same one I'd twisted in my hands during the worst nights, and tucked it into my purse. "It's not just a promise anymore," I told him. "It's our new beginning." That evening, Greg called with the final blow. They've agreed to a plea deal, community service, restitution, and their reputation? It's done. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A text from Claudine. "Hope you're proud. You've torn this family apart." I stared at it for a long moment before deleting it. For once, I wasn't their scapegoat. I was free. As I walked out of the courthouse the next morning, the sky was gray, heavy with the promise of rain. I stood there for a moment, breathing it all in. Sometimes, I thought, the people who preach family is everything are the first to forget what that means. But my son, my real family, reminded me why I fought. Not for revenge, for our future. This chapter was over, but my story, our story, had just begun.